All right, good afternoon, everyone. Once again, we appreciate you all being here with us today. We are going to go ahead and get started with our Race and Education webinar uh, that we have hosted for Women's History Month. So this webinar is going to be looking at the lessons and best practices of women leaders in politics and in education. And of course, we're joined by two wonderful guests who we will allow to introduce themselves earlier. But before that, I'm going to turn it over to our very own Dr. Ashley Canty to start our conversation, and she will be moderating today's session.
Thank you, Jameson. Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Canty, and I'm the Director of Equity Initiatives here at the Hunt Institute. We're so excited to be here with you all today to have this conversation with two very accomplished women in politics and in education. The Hunt Institute is committed to having honest conversations about issues of race that are embedded in and impact all of education. Our Race and Education webinar series is an opportunity to lift up the voices of the people and organizations who have dedicated their time and resources to improving outcomes for educators and children of color. Today's webinar will focus on just that. Today we are joined by two firsts. Honorable Susana Martinez, the first female and Hispanic governor of New Mexico, and the Honorable Bev Perdue, who was the first female governor of North Carolina. Both of these women have championed for equitable education policy and built careers in politics where they've contributed and continue to make an impact. We are very excited for this conversation and learning more about their leadership paths. Now we will get into our questions and also ask our panelists to introduce themselves. We will start with Governor Martinez. Could you please introduce yourself and give us your why? What was your story and the catalyst for you becoming governor?
Yes, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you and whoever is joining us on the webinar. I am Susana Martinez, and I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. I then went on to college and then to law school in Oklahoma. And subsequently, after getting my law degree, I moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico, where I was an assistant district attorney and was handling some of the most difficult cases that any prosecutor can handle, which was child abuse, sexual abuse of children, child homicide cases. And I did that for 25 years. I was also the elected district attorney, and I was reelected a total of 4 times, elected and then reelected. And I was the first along with 2 other women, the first female elected as district attorney in the state of New Mexico as well. Now, the why is because, well, and then of course, after I turned 50, I decided to make my final decision of whether or not I was going to run for governor of New Mexico. Decision was easy. It was my dream. It was a big dream since I was in high school. And I ran for office and became the first female governor of the state of New Mexico, and then the first Hispanic governor in the United States. And of course, my passion was being a public servant. It didn't matter what my salary was going to be, really, as long as I could live, pay my mortgage and buy a car every now and then. My motives were really helping those little ones that needed a voice in a courtroom. And then again, at a broader scale as governor, what I could do at a broader scale for families and children and kiddos in education, that was one of my priorities. Is that opens so many doors for children to walk through, to be able to be whatever it is that they dream to be, and be a leader in whatever arena they want to be a leader in. Whether it is in business, whether it is as an elected official, whether it is a great mom, whether it is a great grandma, whatever it may be, that you can be a leader and a great one, but with a really good education as your foundation as well.
Thank you so much for that, Governor Martinez. Seems like you've had a lot of firsts in your career, so we are so honored that you were able to join us today. Our next question will be for Governor Perdue. Similar to sharing your why, and what was the catalyst for you to run for governor as the first female governor of North Carolina?
The catalyst for me to run for governor started when I was in 7th grade. And I had this teacher, I was a coal miner's daughter, and I had this teacher, Miss Beck, who taught me to believe in myself and to set big goals and have big dreams, just like Governor Martinez said, you've got to have that big dream. And I think I'm enough older than you all and probably most of your viewers today. Thank you for having me here, by the way. That I'm a generation of women in the country that is can remember when the professions that were open to women were very limited. You could be a nurse or a school teacher, secretary, 3 things when I graduated high school. Or you could be a wife, which is what 95% of the people in my graduating senior class did. And there was nothing wrong with all those. They were all laudable ways to spend your life. But my 7th grade teacher said, Bev, you can be whatever you want to be if you work hard, if you study, if you believe in yourself and in others, and if you try. And so that's how I developed my whole career. I taught school. I did all the things women do back in the day. I ended up at Florida, the University of Florida, and became a gerontologist, community college administrator. I learned about old people. That got me into politics. When I got into politics, I realized very quickly as I moved back to North Carolina that the only way you could be really successful in politics was to be the decision maker rather than somebody begging for the decision. And so I understood the concept of power and understood that there were so few women in the country at that time, and now as well, who were powerful, who had access to the boardroom, to the board table, that the things that I cared so much about, from kids to families to equity, to human rights, to civil rights, all these big passions were wrapped around the one overriding paradigm that to get something done, one has to be involved. And that's what I did. So later on, after a 25-year journey, I met the first governor of North Carolina, who was a woman.
Well, both of you have such amazing stories, and I love the role that education played to get you to where you all are today, but also the mention of those big goals, just really recognizing not only the support that you have, but the power and the ability to make changes for children, and also the impact that education had on your careers. Is just absolutely amazing knowing that that was part of your why. The next question, we will start with you, Governor Martinez. In 2019, a research study on mentorship stated that only 37% of professionals have a mentor, although 76% of people find them valuable. How has mentorship shaped your leadership style and ability to navigate an often male-dominated political space?
Well, first of all, it's well overdue that we not have a greater percentage of women in the different levels of politics. I remember being asked all the time as, how do you feel about being the first? And it's like, it's long overdue. It should have happened a long time ago. And so when I was making decisions about where I was going to go as a lawyer and decided to be an assistant district attorney, there wasn't another district attorney in the state, female, that I could figure out and use as a mentor. And so I didn't know how exactly to do this except pave my own way. So if you don't have the mentorship, and you figure it out, you figure out how you're going to pave your way, and hopefully maybe at the end be a mentor for younger girls and women to say, I can do this and I can rely on these mentors. Now, when I was district attorney, 98% of the people I had to work with were men. And of course, there were those that were wondering if I could do the job. I was the DA, and they were going to make me prove it. And I did. And I welcomed the challenge. It didn't matter to me that some were skeptical. I was willing to take on that challenge and prove myself, work twice as hard, and then bring them along and prove to law enforcement officers that I worked with from federal all the way down to local, that I could do this job and I could do it well and honestly. We did that together eventually, and then I earned their respect. I earned from them that they knew I could do this job. When I became governor, once again, I think through the RGA, of course, and getting together with the National Governors Association that included Democrats and Republicans, then I started to see how others were governors of their state. I watched I listened. I also listened to the people in New Mexico. That was so important to me, is not to be the only one, always the one that was talking. Sometimes you just have to hush and listen to what people say is important, to what they say needs to be fixed. And every single time it was education. New Mexico ranks 51 in the country today. We make improvements, and it depends on whether there's a change in leadership as to whether ideas change. And in Mississippi, they have really moved the ball in that state, because in spite of the change of leadership, the actual policies didn't, and they continued to move forward and improve the education of those students. I don't care whose name is on a particular policy. All I want to see is the end results of that. I want to make sure that it is a successful policy. And as a leader, if it's not working, make the tweaks that are necessary or abandon it, and make sure that there are policies that are implemented that are good for those that have chosen you to lead the state. I've always wanted to surround myself with people that were experts in their arenas, because I cannot be all things to all people. I happen to be a Hispanic, I happen to be a woman, but without ideas and moving forward and the ability to bring people together, both sides of the aisle, and actually advocate for things to be better, then I'm just happen to be a female, and I just happen to be Hispanic. There's a whole lot more that has to be brought to the table. And I hope that I did that, because I was really good at crossing the aisle and talking to those that I needed to talk to make sure we get past legislation. Because we're a majority state of Democrats in New Mexico. And so have a Republican governor is rare. And to be outnumbered by 3-1 and get elected is even rarer. And I did it twice. So you have to be able to surround yourself with experts, make sure that you have the ability to make tough decisions and live with them, but also be willing to change things that are not working.
Thank you so much for that. Those are really great examples of one, bipartisanship, but also doing what's important for those who matter, which are the children, the kids, and education. And really thinking about how we bring those ideas to the table and being ready to pivot. Governor Perdue, same question. How has mentorship shaped your leadership style and ability to navigate an often male-dominated political space?
Well, it was very male dominated when I was in the public arena for years. There was no other woman in about half of our state. 49 counties had never had a woman elected senior politician. So I never had a mentor, even when I was a young woman. There were so few women in powers of position. I went to law school too. There were 3 women in my law class. I'd never talked to a female lawyer. I look back on those days and I think how different it might have been had I had a mentor, how different I might have been, because I think there's so much value for each of us as individuals to find someone who perhaps is a bit older, can be younger, but I've always relied on older people to pass it on, pass it forward, if you will, so that the wisdom that they have attained can be passed on down. And as I entered politics in the 80s, there were not many elected women officials. So you can imagine the lack of female companionship and friendship forced me into relationships and friendships with great male peoples like Governor Hunt from the Hunt Institute. And so I began to rely not just on women mentors, but men mentors. And that made a real difference in what I learned and what I could get done. And so as I have moved through the public and the private sector, one of the things I do most frequently is talk to people about focusing on who they are and how much they're willing to give up to get to where they dream they should go. And then how do you get there? What are the tools? So if I were a young woman or a young man somewhere in America or somewhere around the world, I would kind of chart out what my big goals are for my life. And I would find people in those fields whom I might talk to, and whom I might apprenticeship with, and whom I might learn from, and begin to build that contact list. Because you'll never know when you get to a pathway of moving forward who you've met when you were younger with no access that you can rely on and seek wisdom from. And so that ability to have a huge contact list. Right now, my phone contact list is about 48,000 people, but that's from a lifetime of relationships. Build on those relationships and value them and become mentors to the people who seek your guidance. It's all about building a better world. And right now, as I look around about what's going on, what you see, the school shooting yesterday, just the tragedy of the inability, as Governor Martinez stated, to be bipartisan, to find ways to be collaborative. All that seems to be slipping out of our fingers right now at this point in time. And so it's, again, those relationships that you build and that you value and that you nurture that can make your life richer and can make your work much more successful.
Yes, I like the focus that you said on the apprenticeship. You know, at the Hunt Institute, we actually have, if anyone is interested in a summer internship, we also have a fellowship program that helps students get into the ed policy space. And so, you know, really being able to kind of have that mentorship, that ability to do this work, so that hopefully as people think about those big goals and those ideas and how to create change, they're able to find that within the work that we're able to support, but also as young people in college or graduate school, just having the opportunity to begin that work early. As you both have mentioned, that was a really important piece of like your development into the roles that you held as governors. I have a follow-up question, so we will start with Governor Perdue and then go to Governor Martinez. What types of support are needed to encourage the leadership development of women who desire to go into politics?
Dr. Canty, I was just thinking about the mentorship thing. I think it's also important to consider in education whether we begin once again to require, as part of the education training, the opportunity to work in a school, to have some real-time apprenticeship experience. So folks who drop out of teaching in those early years, which is where the numbers still are, have experienced the classroom and can understand early on whether they want to continue to be an educator. So I think mentorship, I think any kind of experience that you can have will help propel you to where you want to go, those relationships and that whole closet of different kind of aspects of learning and teaching will make a difference. The policy comes from your prior learning, and that's part of what should be encouraged for folks to do.
Thank you for that. Governor Martinez, same question. What additional types of support are needed to encourage the leadership development of women who desire to go into politics?
You know, when I started to look, I actually watched on television senators on the House floor or on the Senate floor, and they'd be debating, and I was in junior high. And I loved the debate. I thought this is so exciting because hopefully from both sides debating, the best thing would come from it. And that's when I first started this interest in wanting to be in politics, but I didn't know how to get there. I had no idea what education was necessary to be elected as a, let's say, a senator or Congress or in the House. And so I thought they were all lawyers. I don't know why I thought that, because many of them were. And that's what made me decide that I needed to certainly become a lawyer. And that's why I became a lawyer initially, because I had dreams. Because when I was first in school, you know, and as a freshman, one of the questions that two teachers on a Saturday afternoon asked a bunch of us girls is, where do you plan on being in 5 years? Well, nobody had asked me that question ever before. And all I wanted was really a pretty dress, a date for the spring party, the formal dance. And that was about as far as I was thinking. And this really set me in to start saying, well, I'd really like to be, maybe something in the national level, but then I came back to reality because I didn't have a mentor. There was no one who was a lawyer in my family. There was no one who was in the political world, or anyone that I knew, a friend of a friend of a friend, who I could turn to and say, how do I get there? And so I started to sort it out by visiting Walden Books. I'm dating myself now. I went to the bookstore and started to figure out, what do I need to do? So I went to law school. I figured out how I choose a law school. I didn't know how to do that either, because no one in my family had ever done those things. And so to be able to, now I am, as I say, I'm extremely proud of who I am, but other mentorships come through your career as well. As I started as an assistant district attorney, I had two fabulous leaders in the office that were teaching me the techniques that I needed to be in a courtroom. I was fearless to begin with, but I had to also know how to mold that in a way that allowed me to communicate well with the jury or a judge. They were fabulous people to mentor me. And then when I decided to run for DA, I did the entire campaign myself, along with a couple of friends that worked with me. I decided what ads were going to go up. I had figured out where the money was going to be spent on radio, and I took care of my elections for the 14 years. But then I had to run for office. I decided to run for office for governor, and I remember announcing and stepping back from the podium and whispering to my friend and saying, now what? I don't know what to do next. I know where I'm going to go. I just don't know how to get there. And that's when I started reaching out to people who could help me know the campaign business, and then to the experts in education. I had already learned a lot of lessons from students that ended up in the courtroom that couldn't read. They were 14, 15, 16 and moved along or had already dropped out, but they couldn't read. And that was my first vision of how in the world are we not watching where these kids are and making sure that they're learning as they move along. And so that's why in education, I was starved for the information. Because as a prosecutor, it's not necessarily a part of what I did, but it's certainly something I recognized as an enormous problem in this state. And so then I surrounded myself with the expertise, did a whole lot of research myself, and then figured out, what do I want to do and promise people I'm going to do? And then how do I do it? By surrounding myself with people of quality that could help me make sure that we can implement what I was promising the people I would do.
I think both of you touched on something that's so important, is really that professional network. So whether it's a mentorship or a colleague, just having that group of people that when you don't know what to do, you don't know what's next, can be there to help guide you. I think that is one of the things that I enjoy most about my support system, but also hearing it from you both who have been very successful in your careers and have done so much for education, say like that's a big part of how you got here. It just resonates with me as someone who is like, oh, like this does make a difference. But also thinking back to how you even said back in junior high, like so many of those formative experiences that we think about for young people and young girls are so important, and just helping them to navigate the path, but then also just giving them the idea that you can literally be anything and there will be people there to cheer you on. It's an absolute beautiful story to hear how both of you mentioned that in your journey. So thank you.
And Dr. Canty, excuse me, that's the truth of America right now. A little girl or a little boy can be anything they want to be. It doesn't matter where you're born. I wanted to add one more thing as I got hung up on mentorship, and I apologize for not answering the last question well. When I watch my granddaughters, I really have begun to see the power of competition among women. Men have always competed. Men have always learned to be losers and winners, and then go to the bar after the trauma of the battle and enjoy each other as friends. They understand that you could be one thing in your profession and then successful and happy as a friend after the battle is done. So I would encourage young women out there to get in the arena, whether it's with choir or bell choir or soccer or whatever athletic activity a young woman might want to enjoy. It just changes your life. They become physical, they become much more aggressive. They learn that at the end of the day, you can go on with relationships. I think that's going to add a huge new dimension to the power of women's leadership in America. Don't forget, we're more than 50% of the population. So once we get our act together and we're working on it aggressively across America, everybody better sit back and wait for powerful things to happen.
That's such a good point. I have a goddaughter who is a competitive dancer, and just to see how that experience has helped her to blossom and to grow and to gain confidence. You're right. Like a lot of those group activities, those engagements, and like learning how to navigate different personalities, but then also in the same token, finding your support system are very essential just to being able to believe in yourself and knowing that you have the determination. And as you mentioned, Governor Martinez, just earning that respect and being in those spaces where you welcome the challenge and you can prove to others that, yes, I can do this and this is how it will happen. So that is, I absolutely agree with really being able to build those networks, but also having those experiences that help you to see that you can do this.
Yep.
Our next question will be for Governor Perdue. Governor Perdue, in addition to being North Carolina's first female governor, you're also the first female chair of the National Assessment Governing Board. Drawing on your role as an educator and elected official, how has that assisted you in connecting state and local leaders to making data-informed decisions related to education policy?
Wow, Dr. Canty, it's been without question one of the hardest things I've ever done. I didn't seek the job. I was asked to take it, and I have been chaired not once, but twice. It's a bipartisan board. It's made up of professionals from all of the education arenas that you would think would need to be there to decide what the American report card is going to look like and how we're going to measure America's students and what that has to say about America and your individual states' educational platform and what the impacts are on teachers, but most importantly, kids. Governor Martinez just talked about the fact that kids can't read. When you look at the scores after the pandemic, we did a short and snappy, quicker rendition of the NAGB, the National Report Cards test, the evaluation, and both reading and math were abysmal. There is no way to sugarcoat the results for any state in America. Nobody got better other than some schools in California, which were very surprised at their own outcomes. It's just a hard thing to do, to look at a governor and say, the educational platform you have running in your state somehow in this time, in this place, didn't meet expectations. And it's very important. So I think that data, regardless of how you feel about it, regardless of how you feel about testing, the most important challenge, I believe, for every school superintendent or school board member, for every elected official at any level in America, is to look at what their educational platforms are and what the results are, not to measure the teacher or the child, but to focus resources and policy, which is what the Hunt Institute is about, in the right places, so that we can train people to be teachers, whether they're lateral entry or whether they come from a teacher's college, how perhaps to retrofit teachers' colleges that perhaps aren't meeting the needs of the current crop of folks who are being trained in them, and use that data then to help convince legislators and policymakers to implement strong math and reading programs in every state in America. That's how Mississippi got to the place where they are today. They focused on making sure every child in that state could read. And from my perspective, that's the solution for poverty and for crime in the country.
Thank you for that. I think data is really important to really make those informed decisions and to understand the experiences that people are having. Before we move to the next question, I wanted to see if Governor Martinez, in your role, you've obviously used data to make those informed decisions. If you had any input or insight into how, as one of the first in your state as well, how you were able to help make data informed decisions related to education policy.
I think one of the things that I came to the governor's office with is my 25-year experience as a prosecutor. I made decisions based on evidence every single day. That position is an extremely powerful position because if misused, it can harm a lot of people. And so you do it with great care when final decisions are made. And so I had to make those decisions with data, which meant evidence. What does the evidence say in this case? I may have a great gut feeling that I think somebody did something, but that doesn't mean anything. What matters is there evidence to support my filing charges in this particular case? And if it doesn't, then I move on to the next case, regardless of how I feel, because the data is what's telling me which direction to go. When, as a prosecutor, of course, I'm seeking the truth wherever it takes me. As a governor, then I do the same thing. I want to know the studies. I want to know, and I want good studies, good data. I mean, there's data that you can throw around all over the place, but you want to know that it's coming from somewhere that's reputable, that you can really rely on, because big decisions are made with that data. And so I really used that in every decision I was making was, what does the data say in reference to how much we're taxing people, and are we overtaxing people? And is there necessary, or do we have to cut, should we cut back because we have all this surplus? I mean, does it make sense for me to keep doing that? In education, how do I graduate more kids? I think one of the things that Governor Perdue said is, how important reading is kids learn to read from K to the 3rd grade. And then they read to learn for the rest of their life. If they're not at the point that they should be leaving the 3rd grade, then it is a constant catch up. Even if you're able to catch up, and that's the big challenge if you don't have special programs behind it, such as reading programs, such as truancy programs. Are you showing up to school? You can't learn if you're not showing up to school. Do you have something that helps get those students to the classroom? We put together a whole package, but it was data driven to the problems that this state was experiencing. Not every state is the same. And so we needed to make sure we were focusing, and we have the only minority majority state in the country as well. And so we're very unique. We had to make sure to address those differences, but also understand that they all need to learn. All of the students, regardless of what race, we all need to move ahead together and make sure that then they can actually look at their dreams and say, I now can be a whatever, because I can read, I'm learning, I'm graduating, and then I'm making life decisions.
Yes, the data piece, whether it's the narrative and the stories or the numbers, it makes such a big impact on how you're able to lead and make decisions that have a positive outcome and impact for all, especially related to education. That is so important. And even in our work, being able to help support legislators and state electeds to say, hey, we know that this is what's happening. We've seen this. And the validity and credibility of data is so important to be able to make sure you have the best resources at your disposal to make the best decision, because that is what you have been selected and elected to do. And you want to always, as you said, make sure we're taking care of people. Our next question will be for Governor Martinez. So you were New Mexico's first female governor and our nation's first Hispanic female governor. Do those distinctions come with a burden? Have they created any unique or unexpected challenges or opportunities?
I would never consider it a burden. I would absolutely consider it as an enormous responsibility. As a first, you want to be able to set a very good example in your decision making, and your willingness to fight for what's right, your ability to listen, your ability to constantly be in the communities that make up your state, letting them know what I promised them I was going to do, and letting them also know how am I getting there and am I accomplishing what I promised I would do. I think the responsibility is enormous, but it should be for no matter who is the governor of a state. Yes, I want young girls of color to see that this is possible. I want to be a mentor for those young girls, but I will tell those young girls, if you're not committed, if you're not working hard, if you're not doing well in school, if you need something and aren't asking for it, then you cannot expect to be something just because you happen to be a woman and a woman of color. You have to put in the hard work. You have to prove that you can do the job. And then you have to show that you are amazing at it because you were committed to it and to doing it well. I've had an example in my lifetime where the very first female judge we had in our state, in the county I was in, and I remember thinking, oh no, I knew her as an attorney before that. And I remember thinking, oh no, she is going to take us back many steps because she did not have the grace that was necessary and the knowledge that was necessary to be a judge and a good one. And eventually all of that was exposed in how things were handled. And if you end up being in a position of leadership and you don't take on that responsibility as seriously as you should, then that's what happens. We end up taking a few steps backwards sometimes because we place somebody in a position, an elected position, that wasn't prepared. And if you're not prepared, think about the kind of mentor you end up being versus being thoroughly prepared and willing to ask when you don't know the answers.
I think you make a good point about asking questions, getting the information. There's no harm in saying, I don't know that and I need someone to teach me. And I think oftentimes that can be very challenging, especially for people that are achieving and moving forward, to take a step back and say, I don't know that and I need to know it. And I think that's just characteristic of being a really great leader, being able to say, I need to, and I think you both said it earlier, who you surround yourself with, who knows these things. And always, always asking for what it is that you need to meet those goals is so important, because oftentimes we will go without and not realize that all along there could have been a support there. Governor
Dr. Canty, I loved what you said, Susanna, when you said, whatever it is you do, be amazing. I wrote that down to tell my granddaughters, be amazing.
Well, I need to tell my goddaughters that too. Like, I don't care what you do, but just well, I do care what they do, but be amazing at it. Make sure you put everything in it to be great. And I'm sure my mom had some iteration of that to say to me and my sister as we were growing up. But really, really love what you both have said with that. Now we will take a few questions from our audience. One question is that, are either of you from a family of politicians?
Well, I'll go first. I'm from a family of coal miners, so no, I'm not. No, educators more than anything now.
No, I am not from a family of politicians. Never met a politician, probably until I left law school. But no, we were blue collar workers. My dad was a police officer. My mom was an office secretary. And no, there just wasn't that access whatsoever.
That makes us amazing.
Yes.
It does. It does. I love that. The next question is, what does your future hold? Do you aspire to continue in politics or higher political offices? If you can answer that.
Never say never. Life will bring things to you. I mean, I have a lot of faith. I go back to the days that I was making very difficult decisions at a very young age. I was in my late 20s and handling big cases. And I would, when, at the end of the decision and in court before our jury came back and decided what was going to happen, I remember always setting aside quietly and saying, saying a prayer and saying, please, if I have not made the right decision, let the jury make the right one for me. And so I've always had the faith that if I could rely on, and with the great hopes of doing what is right, even though there are times that you have to accept and admit when you're wrong. I think people do that every day, and they expect that from their leaders as well.
I think that, well said, Governor Martinez. I think that you have to, and I was asked this question a whole lot, Dr. Canty, for all the years I've been in the public arena, and even now during Women's History Month, I've continued to be asked it by many of the media outlets. What is the sacrifice of anything you do, whether it's in the business or the political or whatever arena you choose to spend your life in? And I think the bottom line for me at my age now, in retrospect, is that you have to choose what your priorities are, choose what you believe, and what you're willing to do to make what you believe work. And with that, no, there'll be some sacrifices. So when I was away from home for 25 years, in retrospect, you gave up part of the relationships you had with friends. I found a time every day, and I still do it, to have meditation and prayer in the morning, read the Bible, because I'm a Christian. And then I found time to exercise. And that's been my rule for how you live your life. Do those two things every day, or every day that you can, and give that little bit of space during 24 hours to yourself. And then I gave it all up to my family and my church, but most of all to my career. And I think what I, in retrospect, realized that I sacrificed was my friends. And so now as I think about my time, because time, quite frankly, you all may not see it at your age, but time is your most valuable, priceless commodity. You can't get it back. And you have to put your mouth and your energy and your activity and your time into where you think you want to go. I'm writing a book. I'm doing some short vignettes on what it's like to be in politics. A lot of my friends are scared to death. I'm telling the deep secrets from North Carolina's history. And then what it's like to face a country that we see today, and the challenges of America, as well as the challenges of getting older. And that's a huge hunk of America's population. So all those things have kept me in the public arena, the work I do on DigiLearn, to be involved at the national and the state level. But I do miss it. And I think that anybody who's out there in public office, or you all at the Hunt Institute, ought to appreciate and enjoy most every day, even though you might hate what you're doing at the time. And that's normal. But take it into consideration, into heart, because it goes so fast.
I do like
Dr. Canty,
Oh,
I'm sorry, if I could just say one thing. Being in office, it's not easy. It takes, as Governor Perdue was saying, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of commitment. You have to love it. You have to have a passion for people and a passion for getting things done. And time is of the essence. And so having that passion, I certainly miss the policy, the decisions and policy and all the things that go with it. I miss the people. I miss visiting all the small communities throughout my state. I had very great relationships, and lots of pictures taken with lots of people. I made myself as available as I could, because I knew that I had Republicans and Democrats who voted for me, because that was the only way I could get elected. And I was going to honor that I was able to pull people from two of the parties to be able to become the next governor. We look at the country as it is today. We cannot shy away when our country is being challenged. We need people of all ages to get into that arena and bring people together again. I'm an American, and I am a woman, and I am a woman of color. But there are so many things that we can bring together that we have in common for the sake of our country. And you have to have that passion, and you have to be a fighter, because sometimes politics can knock you on your behind. But it's how many times you're willing to get back up and get the job done. And for that, I have an enormous passion for it.
I really appreciate that you both named taking time for yourself. I think a lot of times, as like young women and women who are in professional roles, it's like we pour so much into the work that we may neglect ourselves. And so whether it's family or friends or work, you all just naming that, having that time, whether it's a minute or 5 minutes or a morning, is so important to really centering yourself and finding what is it that drives you, what is that purpose, what is it that, like you said, is going to carry you when the days are hard and when the days get long. And definitely the whole piece of politics, being heavily scrutinized and having those things happen. It's like finding that center, knowing who you are is so important, and being able to push through on the days when sometimes it just doesn't may seem like it may not be worth it. But appreciate that you both found a way to do that. And someone wrote a question specifically related to how you do that and said, what do you have a personal mantra that you say to yourself each day? And we can start with either one of you.
I have this sign in my home office, and I had it in the governor's office, the lieutenant governor's office, the General Assembly, the Senate, where I was appropriations chair. My mother gave me this sign when I was 14 years old. It's the little engine that could, the quote, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I know I can, I know I can. And anytime I felt like I couldn't, I remember that sign and I would look up, and somehow I would feel stronger and more capable and eager, sometimes, not all the time, eager to move forward and get it done.
For me, it is, as an elected official, that it's not about me. It's about the people I serve every single day, and being reminded that it's not about me and whatever I think might be next in my life. It's about the everyday of my public service and doing it well.
Those are both beautiful and amazing, and it was great to hear that from both of you. We have time for 2 more questions, so I will ask one about how you have turned your failures and mistakes into learning lessons. And what suggestions would you have for someone that is navigating relationships with grace, particularly during conflict?
Wow, Dr. Candy, they're supposed to get easier near the end, not harder. I like the idea of navigating a challenge with grace. I think that's a really important word. And I think that while I didn't realize I was trying to do that, I did know that I had to be willing to tell people pretty simply, I don't know, let me hear what your opinions are. And I, like Governor Martinez, surrounded myself with people who were so much smarter than me, all of my cabinet, my advisors, my team, and that team is so important. I would rely on them to bring me the best solutions to what faces this state, just as now with NAGB or with the DigiLearn Foundation that I run with my Our Best Help. I ask them for their solutions. And then, what I've learned to do with grace, I've learned to trust them, because if they're where I believe they need to be in there, they have the qualifications, then I need to learn to listen to them. And so I think over a period, you begin to develop that core security in yourself, that the decisions you make somehow are good ones based on the advice and the data that you received as the primary decision maker. It's tough. Death penalty things were tough. And there were lots of tough things, as Governor Martinez just said, that a governor especially has to do. But you know what? There are a lot of tough things that a mom sitting somewhere in this country has to do with her budget, with her kids. And there's a lot of tough things a dad has to do who's working 2 or 3 jobs. So we all have big buckets. They may look different, but grace is the answer to most of the issues that come into everybody's bucket.
I've always found it important that just because we disagree does not mean that we cannot handle the situation with grace. As a prosecutor, I walked into a courtroom every single day of 25 years, whether I was teaching new lawyers or I was handling the cases myself. And we went in to battle in the courtroom with respect, but we both had different opinions, different arguments, always making them to the judge, but we were at battle in the courtroom. And afterwards we could walk away and have a cup of coffee and sit down and talk and laugh. Because the next day I was going to have that same lawyer in the courtroom and we were going to do it again. And so the grace comes from your ability to understand that you're talking about issues, that it's not personal. It's not that, I mean, I think that's some of the things that we're experiencing in our country today, is that things get so personal and negative just because there's disagreement. We're losing that ability to have grace in our disagreements. And we don't have the grace at all times to find where do we actually agree, because we're so busy dividing instead of saying, what do we have in common so that we can solve some of these bigger problems? It's not always easy. You taking arrows as an elected official all the time. I have a really strong backbone. I had to. I mean, I was in battle in courtrooms for a long time. As governor, constantly there's somebody who will call you names, accuse you of things, tell you something or another, and especially with the social media that we have today. I just found it easier. I listened. If it was hateful and unproductive, I moved on. If it was something that I could bring and de-escalate and say, can we talk about this? I would try that. But at the end of the day, if we're not working together, I think then we forget that it isn't about us, that it's actually about the people we serve. And we have to do that with grace. And we do it in little ways, like making time for people who want to sit and talk to you about something, even though you have an appointment to go to, even though you have the next speech to be given. I always gave the time. And I would sit and talk with someone in a corner at a park, where we could sit down really quick after I had given a speech at the park, because that was important to that person. And so with that grace came respect.
I think that's a good segue into our last question. What can, and someone's, or one of our audience members says, it's wonderful to have access to this wisdom from amazing women. Thank you. Which is probably why the questions got harder, because we know we are in a space where people have answers and experience. What are some of the ways that non-politicians and non-teachers can provide mentorship to young women who may not have great access to quality education or mentors to help them find what they need?
Now, your question said, how do we find?
How do we help support those young women who may not have access to quality education or mentors to help them find what it is that they need to be successful?
Well, I'm going to start with quality education, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think quality education comes from not getting stuck in failing schools. We have great schools, and some of these schools have, exemplary teachers. We have great public schools. But when you have a school that's failing, and I had the data, I saw every single school in this state, and I knew how they were doing. I knew how many kids were not at grade level, how many kept getting passed along, how many were dropping out, how many were just, and then ending up in the criminal justice system. And so I got to see all that data. And I would look at the schools and saying, why aren't parents moving these kids? We have a law that allows that. They don't have to be stuck in failing schools. Is there another school, whether it be charter or public school? Because charter schools are public schools. Every student, every family that pays taxes for students to attend either what we understand as a regular public school or a charter school. But parents have a choice that they don't get stuck in a failing school. And so when you end up grading a school a D, an F, an F, an F, 4 years in a row, then you're not going to find a good mentor in that school. You're not going to find good education. We should place children in situations. A parent should make those decisions to place children in classrooms where they know they'll have access to good teachers, great teachers, exemplary teachers, and have that access as mentorships. But if they're stuck in a failing school, they're not going to get positive mentors. Sometimes, I mean, what I've always told people is we all had really good teachers. We remember them. And then there were some of them that weren't so great. And we remember them too. So that happens still to this day. I just want to increase the number of really good teachers for our kids in every school. And how do we kind of say this maybe is not your profession? Maybe this isn't fit for you. And maybe this student we should put first and placing them in a place that's really good for them to be successful.
Thank you for that. Governor Perdue?
Very quickly, I don't believe the school can do it all. I've never believed that. And I think regardless of how many schools have exemplary teachers in them, that there are going to be some kids who struggle and who need to have some kind of focused activity. So one of the things that I have worked so much on is Big Brothers, Big Sisters. I think every child should have some kind of outlet, some adult that is the focal point of their life that they can go to, whether it's through the church or whether it's through Big Brothers, Big Sisters, whether it's through some community organization or some volunteer group, like a civic club who takes on a Big Brother, Big Sister role. I think that kind of adult in every child's life really can make a difference. But again, I don't believe teachers right now, with the burdens they carry, can take on the social emotional needs of America's great numbers of children with social emotional problems or issues. That's something worthy for the Hunt Institute to study. My friend, the fellow governor, who is a member of that board, perhaps you could focus your board toward helping find out a way that kids might have that adult or that mentor who can challenge them if their families are perhaps not able to.
You know, Dr. Canty, I might add, you're absolutely right, Governor Perdue. It is the entire community, your church, any kind of organizations for sports. Sports are amazing for kids to learn teamwork and leadership. But I also think that in the educational realm, my parents did not go to college. My parents went to high school, finished high school. My parents could not help me with my algebra. My parents could not help me with any of the things that I was working on in school. And so I had to rely, and I, thank God I was not one that had special mental health issues or anything that needed some special attention, but I still needed a good mentor. And those two amazing teachers that opened my eyes to the potential that I could do what I did, took one Saturday on a weekend, one Saturday on a weekend with a bunch of us girls saying, where are we going to be in life in 5 or 10 or 15 years? Think about it now and verbalize what you would like to do. That was instrumental in my life. And I think that there are teachers, these teachers didn't have to do it. They didn't get paid for doing it. They were just so interested in opening those doors for girls. And they did that for me.
Yes, that is absolutely amazing. I'm very fortunate. I had really great teachers. I also had a mom who stayed at the school volunteering. So there wasn't much that was going to happen that she didn't know. Sometimes I didn't even know she was there. But ultimately it paid off, and she says that a lot. But I agree, the civic organizations, community groups, churches are so important. Fraternities and sororities that do community-based work, being able to give back. Because you're right, the schools can't do it all. And we recognize that through the work that we do, through our 1 million Teachers of Color work, that there's a significant gap in what students need and what they're able to get, and how we're able to fill that gap through policies, procedures, resources, and support. But overall, I just want to say thank you to both of you. I know of both of you working at the Hunt Institute, being a North Carolina resident, but to be in this space sitting with you is such a great honor, to have you both here and to be able to engage and just to hear your stories. And I hope that the participants of this webinar feel that same way, because this was an amazingly beautiful conversation about support and women's leadership, policy, and change. And I don't know if I've ever been as fortunate enough to be in the room with such powerful and motivating women. And so I really just appreciate you all. I hope people give you your flowers and all of the things, because what you're doing does not go unnoticed. And whether it's for the Hunt Institute or other organizations, we extend our gratitude to both of you. I hope everyone has a great rest of their week. At the Hunt Institute, we do webinars once a week throughout all of our content areas. And so if you loved this one, please see us back here next week with another webinar from our teams. They are all posted on our website. Follow our president, Javed Siddiqui. He's always tweeting and putting out really great information, and follow these two wonderful women who have been here with us today to share their wisdom. So again, thank you both, and I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Bye-bye. Thank you, guys.